Just want to ask a really quick question because I wrote this in 1989 and it was for the Family Focus Conference. Who was there? Okay, all right. Sorry? In Victoria.
89.
Was it?
No, Amanda was 1.
So it's kind of an abridged, updated version, but we thought it was important for people just to, kind of hear some of the history. And it's written for one of my sons, and the original title was called "The Phone Never Rings for Bob." So, in 1989, I wrote about my son Bob's life. It was called "The Phone Never Rings for Bob," and described how service systems had pretty much determined what his life would look like, the struggle I had trying to convince people to think about what was really important for him, and the impact it had on him and the rest of our family. I talked about how I allowed others to direct and determine what life should look like for him, accepted service I knew wouldn't work just to have something, allowed myself to be influenced by others who thought they knew my son's needs better than I did. I spoke of how that led to a life that was staff rich and relationship poor. I talked about what sustained and nurtured and kept him safe and what our dreams were. I wanted him to be more connected to his community and to have more people in his life that weren't paid to be there. He was 20 years old. So when Bob was born in 1969, life was pretty good for us. He was our second son, and we experienced the normal rhythm of typical family life, building careers, spending time with family and friends, and feeling part of community. We got to celebrate his birth. He wasn't diagnosed as requiring any kind of intervention until he was 3. And even then, there wasn't really a specific diagnosis, just, kind of a global delay. I naively thought, okay, let's just get him some speech therapy, because that was one of the main issues. And once he learns how to talk, he'll be fine. So it took about 3 years for it to sink in. Sometimes I just naively just go along and think, just continue to go on, and it's like, oh, I should have really figured that out a long time ago. So it took about 3 years to sink in that this is probably never going to go away, and we were in it for the long haul. So I entered a world I didn't know anything about and wasn't really thrilled about joining. And this was not the life I had planned, and I didn't feel or want to belong there. It wasn't for us, thank you very much. So we went to a child development center until he was about 6. Really wasn't a terrible place, but it was just kind of this weird thing that, this little yellow bus would come along and pick him up in the morning around 7:30, and then he'd go for the day. He was 3 years old, right? And just like, what was I thinking that I would put my 3-year-old on this bus and then just take him and leave him in this place for the day? So he went there until he was about 6, and then he came home at the end of the day and kind of spat him out again. It wasn't a terrible place, but he kind of resisted any kind of formal intervention, and he began to earn his reputation as being kind of a difficult kid. And I think he actually did pretty well at trying to let people know he really didn't appreciate walking up fake stairs that never went anywhere. Practiced putting on his coat when he never got to go outside. And when he was 6, I was told that he had to attend a school. I was told that he had to attend a school only for children with disabilities. And so and I was a young mom, you can totally tell, right? So that was kind of started the beginning of my advocacy for him, because the thought crossed my mind, it's just like, well, he kind of lives in a family, and, and we're in this community, and he's got a brother and a sister, and I got to choose where they went to school, and so, he doesn't live with people with disabilities, and so why should he have to go to school with everybody that has a disability? So it just didn't make a lot of sense for me. So I didn't know where these thoughts came from, and most of the time I had no idea what I was doing, like none. And for some reason, I just inherently know that I wanted something different for him. So I found a school in another school district that had, in those days, an integrated program, and I got permission to enroll him there. And those were pretty good years for Bob. He loved being there, and although he was in a separate annex in a classroom, he participated in school plays. You know, he got to go to music programs and, you know, just kind of do the non-academic things. He went on camping trips. He spent time in a regular classroom with other students. And I can look back on that now and see how going to school in another district restricted and limited his participation and connection to his community. And it never occurred to me to expand on the connections that he made with other students after school or on weekends. And it was unthinkable to me that a typical child would be interested in spending any time with him. And to ask for Bob to be enrolled in a regular classroom in his neighborhood school was a completely foreign concept. So that would be probably in the 70s, I guess. Yeah, late 70s. So I'd begun to see my lovely, spirited, engaging little boy as broken and needed to be fixed before he could belong or be accepted anywhere. That was the message you were given, you know, that he had to, you know, have certain skills before he was able to be included in certain things. So in those days, and sometimes still now, the focus was on deficits, delays, getting ready, never on gifts, contributions, and strengths. And I think that subtly changes you in ways you're not even aware of. It's like hiding a huge secret, and the energy it takes to keep it down, that takes its tolls, and it's something that you kind of don't even realize for years later. So, on one hand, I don't think I was going to do this actually. Okay. You kind of begin to basically deny who you know your child really is. But those were good times still. So we were fortunate to have a summer home at Shawnigan Lake, not far from Victoria where we lived. Oh, thank you. All right, I'll take it. So Bob, I'm not that strong. Bob swam, he surfboarded, and there's a picture of him up there, and you'll see him, he's the one little kid waving on the surfboard. He made forts, he went berry picking, he slept in a tent, and he got teased and picked on along with all the other kids there. I hardly ever saw him actually, and he knew all the kids, and his brother and sister were there too, and they just kind of looked after him. And then when he was just acting up, they'd just say, "Go home," and he, you know, he knew that, you know, until he was going to behave himself, he was not going to come back. So, and it was interesting, and these lessons that you learn, you know, kind of think about afterwards. So it was at Shawnigan that Bob learned how to talk. That's where he learned how to ride a bike. That's where he learned how to swim. Really wasn't at therapy sessions. It was just with the kids. So he knew he belonged. He had family, friends, and community. We had no idea what respite was, or life skills, childcare, or even that existed. I had no social worker. We never really needed them, and I just didn't know what the service system looked like. So we were really fortunate to live, you know, in a world then when we just kind of made our own community, and it worked for us. So he went on to middle school, and this was in Central Saanich, and continued to do well. He hiked the West Coast Trail, portaged the Nat Triangle, and went to work experience, and really felt he was accepted as a part of the school community. And so gradually, life as a teenager became a lot more difficult for him. I was now a single parent, and the world he knew didn't exist anymore. So he began to act out, he ran away, and became increasingly unpredictable. So the first time in our life we had to ask for help for the system. So I was offered a placement in a group home, which was not what I or he wanted. And he eventually ended up in Glendale Institution, even though I desperately wanted him to come home and for the support to be provided to us in our home, in his community. The answer was no. That wasn't something that they seemed to understand would kind of work for all of us. It was like, these are the choices you have. So it was clear that we had different approaches to how Bob should be supported. He went to another school, and except for his family, every connection he had to the past was severed. He deteriorated in mind and in body and in spirit. So I'm not going to go into detail about it, but you can imagine how hard it is all those years later. It's surprising to me. So he lost many of the skills and ability that he really never regained. And it was very interesting to me that when I felt the most helpless to change things for him and us personally, I became more involved in the advocacy movement. And sometimes there's a moment of clarity when you make a decision which will change your life forever. And I remember this. It's amazing, and we could probably all have this same kind of description around. You remember where you were, who was in the room, probably what clothes you were wearing when something comes to you. So mine was after a meeting at Glendale in a room full of professionals who discussed my son in terms of functioning ability, and again ignored me when they asked what I wanted, and I said I wanted him to get better and I wanted him to come home. So after that meeting, I made a vow to myself that no other parent would ever, or I would try to see that no other parent would have to go through this experience if I could help it. So again, that was the beginning of kind of moving forward into, family support. And I worked with the kids in the elementary school system, and I saw these amazing students that I was working with and how much potential they had, and how, after they finished high school, they kind of just sat home. And I realized that nobody was helping and supporting their families to have dreams for them, to have expectations for them. And so that was another kind of realization that I came to, is that we really have to begin to work with the families in order for them to increase their expectations around what their sons and the gifts and the contributions and the things that they can. So eventually we knew we had no other option. So he did go to live in a group home, and we had no other option. It didn't go well to remove him, and Bob's dad took him home to live with him. And then a few years later, he went to live in a family model home, and it went well for a while before we knew again it wasn't working out. And after numerous attempts to resolve the issues and concerns, the home was finally closed. And we did find another home for him too, and we had more of a choice the next time. Although, while Bob's life is settled and he's doing better than he ever has, he's still surrounded by people who are paid to be in his life. They are committed to him and they value him. And he's done some pretty cool things like whale watching, kayaking. He's vacationed at a dude ranch. He's been to Qualicum. And just about 6 weeks ago, he spent the weekend or a couple of days during the week at Tofino with two of his long-term care providers. So I've learned no matter how well things are going, it could change overnight. And if I don't pay attention, it will, because it has. No matter what the circumstances, when you rely on a network of paid people, that it's it is reality, and you have to remain constantly vigilant. So I'm just going to skip a few things here because I don't think you need a lecture from me. So you live through a lot when you have a child with a disability. You have to try to navigate through an ever-changing system. You build new relationships. You let go of old ones. There are shifts in directions and philosophy, cutbacks in budgets, broken promises, pushing back about decisions that have been imposed upon you. And it's hard not to be influenced by past experiences, not feel jaded, skeptical, and frustrated when people tell you things are going to be different. You know your dreams for your child are always there. Sometimes they're just hidden away below the surface until you have the courage and the time to bring them out again, to expose and steel yourself, risk disappointment that you had asked for, that what you asked for just simply will not happen without a lot of time, energy, and effort. What doesn't change is how much we love and care about our kids and our deep abiding wish for them to be valued, safe, have stability, friends, loving relationships, a sense of belonging and acceptance in community. Most of us take these things for granted and have the ability to achieve them on our own. We know that it doesn't happen for our kids. Bob's going to be 50 next month. Wow. I know. I don't know how the story ends because things are difficult for him right now. He was diagnosed with liver disease about 10 years ago, and that was a result of his the medication that he was put on when he was in the institution and the lack of monitoring and how it affected his liver. So he's been pretty stable for 10 years, but the last few months we've noticed a significant change. And again, he's receiving really, his team is there, they're paying attention, they're care for it. So this story doesn't have an ending yet. And God help me if I'm up here telling it 20 years from now. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. I'll be dead by then. Yeah. So I did think, I thought about how to end this story, and I thought, well, it doesn't really have an ending. I just want it to sort of be a reminder of where we are as families, and my beautiful, wonderful connection to the Family Support Institute, which goes, back as far as this story does, and even then some. So I'm going to leave it there, and hopefully it's provided, something for you to reflect on and to think about. And if there's anything that I can help you with, I'd be more than pleased to have a chat about it. So thank you.